The Chicago Bulls finished the preseason 1-4. We're going to talk about the Chicago Bulls preseason finale game against the Minnesota Timberwolves. We're also going to talk about some of the biggest concerns and biggest positives coming away from the preseason play. We're going to get into all that and more right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bulls Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bulls news and content.
What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host here, Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into the content for today. And so the Chicago Bulls had their last preseason game last night against the Minnesota Timberwolves. And this was a game where we even saw Vooch kind of play into the fourth quarter in this game. And so there are some things to absolutely take away from this game that I do want to go over. You know, Zach LaVine, Andre Drummond both sitting out in this game. Nikola Vucevic having another quiet 20-10 night, just quietly playing extremely well in this game, going 9 of 15 overall from the field, 2 of 5 from three-point range. He chips in 10 rebounds, 4 assists, 1 steal, 2 blocks from Nikola Vucevic as he gets 21 points and 10 rebounds. Vooch absolutely balled out. He led the Bulls in scoring in this game outright, and so you know it was a solid night from Vooch. And Vooch over the last 2 preseason games has quietly showed, his play. He's going to be ready to go for the season, right? Like I said, Zach LaVine sat out in this game. That brought Ayo Dosunmu into the starting lineup. Surprisingly, Billy Donovan went with a lineup of Kobe White and Ayo Dosunmu in the backcourt. Some Bulls fans may forget that initially in Ayo Dosunmu's rookie year, when he was still coming off the bench, him and Kobe actually developed a nice bit of chemistry coming off that bench together before Lonzo eventually goes down and Ayo Dosunmu had to step into that starting point guard role. But Ayo in this game going 5 of 9 from the field, 2 of 4 from three-point range. He chips in 2 rebounds, 2 steals, only having 1 turnover and 15 points. And Ayo Dosunmu is a player that I do want to spend some time talking about because Ayo Dosunmu has quietly had a really solid preseason. A preseason where his role is extremely different than what it was before. And while he played the 2 guard in today's game, when you look towards the regular season, you're probably going to see a lot of wing play from Ayo Dosunmu. That means playing the 2 and the 3. Him and Alex Caruso can both do that. So you're going to see them kind of moved up and down in the lineup in the spot that they play, depending on who they're out there with. But I'll say this, Ayo Dosunmu has done enough, I would say, to me, in this preseason play to really show, you can't really count him out, right? And that I think that he's going to be a nice bench piece for the Chicago Bulls in the season, right? Coming off the bench. We already know what Ayo can be defensively, which he's flashed over this preseason as well. But like Ayo just shows a new awareness of being able to kind of take players off the dribble, find his spots, right? Things like that. And so that's very promising for Ayo Dosunmu to see him come in and play like that. So, shout out to Ayo who, coming in, like I said, has his role drastically changed than what it was last year. Still expectations on him as well, getting that new contract from the Chicago Bulls, that 3-year contract. So, seeing him come in, play really well in this preseason overall, right? Averaging about 10 points per game coming off the bench for the Chicago Bulls in very few minutes on top of that, right? He's averaging right under 10 points per game, 4 and 4, close to those stats coming off the bench over the course of the preseason play. That's extremely solid for a bench player. And why that's kind of even more exciting for Ayo Dosunmu is that, listen, that bench, while a very solid defensive bench, they don't really have a lot of scoring coming off that bench. Devon Carter is a shooter coming off that bench. Alex Caruso can score, but we know it's not his best attribute, but he's talked about how he wants to, focus on shooting and being aggressive offensively a little bit more as well. But, really looking at them kind of scoring by committee, you're probably always going to have one of the starters out there with them to add some scoring to that bench unit. But hey, Ayo Dosunmu's quietly had a very solid preseason, I feel like, as well from the Chicago Bulls, and a very solid game from him overall as well. Kobe White, again, 4 for 10, 1 for 7. The team overall didn't shoot the three-pointer well at all. Now, they did get 36 shots up. They only made 11 three-pointers from that. They were 35 of 81 overall from the field, but Kobe White chipping in 13 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals coming from Kobe White as well in this game. But I got to talk about it, right? Julian Phillips is one of the best takeaways from the Chicago Bulls over the course of this. He just listen, he continues to just learn game after game and show that, like, very much I've told, like, he's like the mix between Derrick Jones Jr. and Javonte Green. And for those that know, we've talked so often about, like, if the Bulls were able to merge those two players, they'd have a really solid player. And so I don't want to put huge expectations on Julian Phillips to, like, get a ton of minutes once the season starts. But Julian Phillips may very well be a steal. Now, outside of that, we also had Patrick Williams have a more aggressive game, right? He didn't really shoot the ball well overall, but Billy Donovan even talked about how important it was for Patrick Williams to be aggressive out there. Didn't shoot the ball well from three, went 0-7 from three. You don't expect that to happen a lot from Patrick Williams, but at least it seems like he did respond well to the lack of aggression that he showed that caused him to sit in the last preseason game a little bit of time there. So, if he's going to be that more aggressive and play this more aggressive style that he played today, I think more times than not is going to pay off for him, right? And so that's why we want to see Patrick Williams be more aggressive, because with the way that he played in last night's game, I think that he's going to be a bigger positive overall. So, I think that, you want to see that aggression. He showed that a little bit. It's still, he didn't get the results that he wanted, and I don't want to take away from that because he didn't shoot the ball well. But he did come in. He had an almost poster dunk on Rudy Gobert in the first half, towards the end of the first half. So, you want to see that. He went 4 for 4 from the free throw line. He 3 for 12 from the field overall. So, Billy Donovan saying this, he shot the ball really poorly and everyone still felt his presence in the game. He made some great passes. He got to the glass. He rebounded. I give him credit. So, that's the thing, right? Always making your presence felt. That's what we've talked about with Patrick Williams. That is the thing. You can't allow yourself to go quietly into the night. And so, Patrick Williams, even when the shot isn't falling, can find ways to impact the game. And he did that a little bit in this game, right? So I want to give him his credit for that. 5 rebounds, 1 assist, 1 block in this game. He still chipped in 10 points as well, but he went 3 of 12 from the field, 0 of 7 from three-point range. We know Patrick Williams is a much better three-point shooter than that, right? We know that. So I do think that if those same shots that he got, if you play the same game more times than not, he's probably going to hit about 3 of those 3-pointers at least. And that, then you're looking at, without changing very much, just hitting your shots at a better frequency, you're adding 3 threes to that. You're talking about a 19-5 game from Patrick Williams. That's why aggression is important for Pat and what he does for the Chicago Bulls. But, that's kind of my thoughts on the game. I have a full post-game show on the channel if you guys want to go and check that out. But outside of that, let's talk about some of the biggest concerns for the Chicago Bulls coming out of this preseason play, these 5 preseason games. One is turnovers. Turnovers have been a big part of the story. We know that the Bulls are trying to move the ball around a little bit more. But the reason why I put turnovers on here, yes, you're going to get more turnovers with passing more, right? You want to limit the overpassing, but you still want to have ball movement, player movement, all those type of things. But why turnovers can be so costly for the Bulls, one of the reasons we were a top 5 defensive team last season is that we limited points in transition. You have to get that underway for the Chicago Bulls. You do not want to be one of those teams that have a bunch of turnovers and you allow teams to really convert heavily on those second chance points. You got to avoid that if you're the Chicago Bulls. Like I said, overall, some really positive things with the Bulls moving the ball around, better things like that. I don't want to take away from that because those are things that absolutely are going to help this team be a better overall squad, and you want to see that continue to go. But listen, you can't allow huge amount of second chance points. So we gotta figure out how to limit that, right? We gotta figure out how we're going to, move the ball around more, be a bigger passing team, use our team as a whole, but we have to limit second chance points from the team. And you look at time of possession for the Chicago Bulls. Because of the turnover in this past game, for example, the Minnesota Timberwolves had the ball about 6 minutes more than the Chicago Bulls. So those type of things definitely play a part in it. Again, I don't want to act like it's huge. Like the Chicago Bulls, for example, in the Minnesota game, even though we had a lot of turnovers, the Bulls had 10 second chance points, whereas the Minnesota Timberwolves had 13 second chance points. So not a huge discrepancy there. Again, though, the Minnesota Timberwolves didn't play any of their starters in the second half of the game. So, that could be even worse for the Chicago Bulls going forward. But we need to get those turnovers underway. Protect the ball while you're still trying to move the ball around. So that's something as well. Another concern for the Chicago Bulls, Patrick Williams' inconsistencies, right? Again, when you look at it, he played more aggressive minutes than not, right? So there's that positive sign in the right direction, but, it's still some of that, right? And so Patrick Williams, matter of fact, I'm going to go ahead and play a clip. This is what Patrick Williams said.
Well, I mean, it's as a player, it's always like a tricky thing. Some players don't like to get pushed or challenged. Some do. mean, I feel like the great ones, they usually do. They usually respond well. So for me, that's kind of how I viewed it. Obviously, you never want a coach to give up on you. Credit to him, he didn't. You know what I mean? Doing that, taking me out early, whether it was challenging me or testing me or however you want to put it. It was something that I got to respond from, and the good players do that well. So I told him, just stay on me. Don't ever take it easy. Don't feel like you gotta try to please me or anything like that. But if I'm bullshitting, take me up. Hey, come on. You will.
So Patrick Williams talking about, bench him, right? Basically what he's saying. And I respect that wholeheartedly. I respect having that mindset of, if I'm bullshitting, bench me. I get that. That's great to say. It's a great soundbite, great clip, but that shouldn't even be a question. Go out there and play. And so, Patrick Williams' consistency, especially because he's needed. Him and Kobe are going to be so important because we saw the core three in Vooch, DeMar, and Zach played the most minutes of any three-man group in the league last season. So we primarily know what they're going to bring, right? But having the glue guys, right, the role players step up, and Kobe, the other two starters, and Kobe and Patrick Williams, it's important that they always give consistent effort. It's important that they always bring fight. So Kobe White too, but Patrick Williams' consistency is something that can be glaring, right? And so we talked about in yesterday's episode, the eye test, right? And that's why Torrey Craig is a player that a lot of Bulls fans look at and they always see what he's doing because he passes the eye test hugely for the Chicago Bulls. He's always being active, always kind of having his body in the right spot. We talked about a night where Torrey Craig went 2-7 from the field, but we still talked about him being able to positively impact the game. We need that from Patrick Williams. And like I said, last night, didn't shoot the ball well, but he did make his presence felt. But we need to just see that consistently from Patrick Williams, at least in my opinion. Another concern for the Chicago Bulls, Dalen Terry. Listen, I came into the season saying Dalen Terry's probably not going to play a lot of minutes. I didn't have that expectation on him, but it's more than just that. Dalen Terry looks so far off. He looks 3 years away from being 3 years away, and that is a concern when this is a player that you drafted with the 18th overall pick, and yet you eventually need him, and we talked about it, right? The Bulls aren't going to have a lot of cap space until potentially 2025, so that means over the next 2 seasons, your young players developing is highly important to raising the ceiling for your team, right? You're not going to be a team that's very active in the free agent market. You can make some things happen, absolutely, right? But if you're keeping this core primarily together, you're not going to be too active. You need your young players to step up, and you need your young players to develop. And right now, Dalen Terry is uncontrolled out there. He's kind of he's going off nothing but instinct. I know he has basketball IQ, but we're not seeing him play with basketball IQ. And because of that, it's just leading to a lot of mistakes, a lot of, over calculated on pick and rolls, things like that. These are things that we want to see Dalen Terry just improve in. And we know that he can, right? Well, I guess we don't necessarily know that. That's why it's a question, right? We think that he can. And I'm sure the Bulls believe that he can. That's why they drafted him. But we need that consistency from Dalen. We need that consistency from him, and we need him to just be able to come out there and do what he does well. Now, he had a great highlight reel alley-oop to Julian Phillips, but again, that was probably his biggest highlight from the preseason play. And when you're a player that's coming into your second season, you just expect him. Now, he didn't play a lot of minutes. He still has tons of growing to do. I am not saying this to say, like some of the Bulls fans, we need to trade Dalen. Not saying that at all, but I am saying that the player development staff needs to be working with Dalen every single day. You built out a whole department for player development. We need them to be focusing on Dalen because at some point we're going to need Dalen to be able to give us productive minutes if he's going to want to continue to be on this team. So that's kind of some of the negatives from, adjustments still are always going to be a thing with Billy Donovan. You always got to look at, his lack of adjustments at times and how that goes with him. It sucks that that's still something that we're talking about, but hey, every coach has their flaws, and that just happens to be one of Billy Donovan's flaws. So and like I said, I don't want to kind of overblow it. It was in that one game against the Toronto Raptors that, the adjustments was the biggest thing, but this coaching staff is really going to have to, focus on bringing those adjustments at the right time, right? And bringing in the right guys at the right time, finding the perfect mix and balance of that rotation of when they want to play people is going to be extremely important for the Chicago Bulls as well, especially with that bench scoring, right? We don't have a lot of scoring coming off the bench. I love our bench. That's actually going to be one of the positives we talk about, but how you bring that scoring off the bench, which starter you leave in there, right? We've seen DeMar being left out there with the starters. We saw some of Zach. We saw some of Patrick Williams. It looked better with DeMar and Zach out there, but if you really want to try to force Patrick Williams' growth, right, you're going to have to do some of that. So this is going to be an important season for coaching, especially from Billy Donovan. He's really going to have to coach and figure out that right combination of players to bring the right thing depending on the matchup and the team that you're facing against. And so, yeah, it definitely was a little bit of sign for concern against the Toronto Raptors that we just did not adjust well to what they were doing defensively. That's kind of always when we face the Toronto Raptors, though. We always kind of run into those issues. So we got to just see that tighten up as well. But let's get into some of the positives for this team in preseason play. And one of those biggest positives is the play of Nikola Vucevic. You just can't overlook that. Vooch has been really good, specifically in those last 2 games. And when the Bulls have gone to him to facilitate things like that, we've had solid success in it. Not perfect, right? We haven't done it. It wasn't a large sample size or anything like that, but we saw some positivity in that. And Vooch is going to be probably one of the most consistent Bulls yet again, right? And I know a lot of Bulls fans, they have their issues with Vooch because of what he is and things like that. Those things are going to still be there as well. But you really got to look at Vooch just what Vooch brings is just so important for the Chicago Bulls, and we really don't have anybody to simulate that at a high level. And so Vooch being ready to go is a big thing. But we also got to talk about the preseason. As far as positives, Coby White's playing development has been one of the bright spots in the preseason. When you look at it, he's over the 5 games, averaging 13.3 points per game on 58% shooting from the field, 40% shooting from three-point range, 4.3 assists in just 22 minutes per game. And we know he's probably going to end up playing more minutes a game more than that, once the regular season starts. But Coby White stepping into that starting point guard role has been a very big positive for the Chicago Bulls in this season, consistently kind of finding how to get his points off. That step back jumper in mid-range with his speed and things like that is going to be a deadly weapon for him. And just you trust that he's going to be able to find his place even amongst the starters and the ball-dominant players that he's playing with. Coby's going to be able to find his spot and really contribute to that team. And so other positives, Torrey Craig and Javon Carter. Now, everything hasn't been 100% positive with them, but I do think overall you're looking at bringing in 2 role players that absolutely have the skill set that you need and that have been consistent in that, bringing that to the Chicago Bulls. This preseason play, especially Torrey Craig. Torrey Craig is just always a guy who impacts the game and always doing something positive out there. And I really think him and Javon Carter are going to end up being some favorite for this Bulls team. And, kind of contributing to that, the Bulls bench defense is going to be spectacular this season. This is one of my favorite bench units for the Chicago Bulls, potentially. We got to see how it's going to go over the course of the actual season, right? But their defense and the way that they can get out in transition, the way they can push the pace, the way that a lot of these players as well can finish around the rim, right? And we have 2 players out there with Torrey Craig and Javon Carter that can stretch the floor some, things like that. It's going to be important to find the right balance with what score you want to leave out there and them finding their ability to score coming from the bench. But overall, that bench defense is going to be legit. And I really do, because of the veterans on that bench. When you look at Caruso, when you look at Torrey Craig, Javon Carter, Andre Drummond, you throw in Ayo Dosunmu in that as well, who in college was a scorer, right? He may end up developing into kind of that transition scorer for this bench unit, but I would not be surprised at all if the bench unit kind of finds their identity earlier in the season than maybe the starters do, because I'm really high on this bench unit for the Chicago Bulls and what they can bring. And so overall, I think it's a lot of reasons for positives, a lot of reasons for concerns too, right? Everything isn't 100% positive. They finished the preseason 1-4. You kind of know what went into that as well, but I really appreciate a lot of those things. Julian Phillips is another player that, I don't know. I don't know how much Billy Donovan's going to play him. I want to be clear on that. But I do think that whenever he's going to get an opportunity, you trust he's going to do something out there. He's going to go through the normal, especially if he's guarding other 4s and mobile 4s. He's going to go through some of the foul trouble that we see young bigs do in the league. But Julian Phillips, I said it on yesterday's post-game show, I would not be surprised at all if Julian Phillips' ceiling ends up being higher than even Patrick Williams. Like, I just wouldn't. When you look at the fact that, a top, 10 to 15, I think, All-American coming into college. Of course, his collegiate season kind of affected his draft stock. He was an early second-round pick that we got him for. But Julian Phillips has so much. I talked about it early in the show. Like, he just seems to be that combination of Derrick Jones Jr., Javonte Green that we can really use on that bench unit. And if that continues for the Bulls, hey, that's going to be a big player for the Bulls eventually. It may not be this first season, but we'll end up seeing what Julian Phillips turns out to as well. But that's kind of my thoughts generally around the preseason and where we finished. We're going to have the mailbag episode tomorrow. Sunday, we're going to have the mailbag as well. The first episode Monday, though, is going to be the whole Chi-Town Sports Central crew kind of talking about our expectations now for the Chicago Bulls going into the season. As the season starts Wednesday, we are right at the start of the season, and I can't wait to bring you guys another season of a hopefully amazing content, man. Make sure you guys are following the channel at Bull Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, bullcentralpod@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See red if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.